Welcome. My name's Liz Rowlinson, a journalist with a place in the Sun and the UK Press, and I'm here with Sun Lawyers to talk about applying for a digital nomad visa in Spain. There's so much interest about this visa. We've been asked for this for the last couple of years, and finally it's available 9 months ago, and we've got lots of questions to answer and trying to clarify now. We're getting some idea of exactly how to apply for this visa, the criteria, the do's and don'ts. So with lots of us sort of hybrid working, it's a very, very popular visa at the moment. And I'm going to introduce my panel that we've got here to talk about some aspects of this, and hopefully you can come away with a lot better understanding of the visa. So first of all, I'm here with Mark McMillan, the Sun Lawyers Relocation Expert. Hello, Mark.
Hi, how are you doing?
Great, thank you. You're dealing with loads of applications all the time, and you're kind of you're going to tell us all the lowdown on that.
Yeah.
So thank you. And we've actually got one of your successful applicants here, Elliott. Hello.
Hello, good morning.
We look forward to talking to you about your application. And I've got Matthew here. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, good morning.
From a place in the Sun Currency, who can touch on key the importance of using a currency broker when making this move to Spain as well. So we've got a lot to cover, and we're also going to cover some questions we've been asked from you. So yes, let's kick off. So Mark, tell us about the digital nomad visa. It's got introduced in December 22, didn't it? Can you just tell me a bit about why Spain introduced it?
Yeah, basically, many countries already had introduced this kind of permit. It did take quite a while for it to be, go through the legislation, get agreement, and basically, it was finally agreed. It's something that, allows non-EU, now, most of my clients are Brits, and this is something that's going to gain them access to be able to relocate to Spain. It's something that allows non-EU online professionals to relocate to Spain as residents and continue working online for, foreign currency companies, or, if you're employees or if you're self-employed, it allows you to relocate and to work, have your activity with about, up to 20% with Spanish companies too.
Yes, because the alternative to this is a non-lucrative visa in Spain when you're not allowed to work, or there's a golden visa where you have to spend 500,000 euros on a property. So this digital nomad visa is a great option for Brits to spend more than 90 days in Spain after Brexit. So, Mark, there's a difference between applying for this visa in the UK versus Spain, isn't there?
Yeah, well, if you were to visit a Spanish consulate in your country of origin, you'd be able to obtain a visa, and this will be stamped into your passport. This is typically valid for the period of your permit, your work contract, or your contract with your professional services, and up to a year. So let's say you're on a 6-month work contract, you're an employee, you'll be able to get a 6-month visa in your passport. But once you arrive to Spain, you could convert that to a TIE for the period of your visa also, but would have to submit all the paperwork again. So all my clients so far, we've been doing it in Spain. They've been coming on the 90-day Schengen allowance. That's 90 days in a rolling 180-day period as a tourist, and allow them to apply and get up to a 3-year permit. Basically, you won't be getting a visa, you'll be able to get a TIE residence permit, but it's all fixed, just like the visa, to the period of your work contract. Let's say you're on a 2-year contract, you'll get a 2-year permit. If you're on a, unlimited, then you can get up to 3 years.
At the moment, what sort of mix of your applicants are working for a company in the UK versus being freelance or having their own company and going to work like that?
Well, I've got really 50-50, to be honest. It's quite an even percentage. And for employees, someone working as an employee, this a certificate that can take a lot longer to obtain rather than being self-employed, for example. So, depending on your situation will come across the timeline a bit later. But, it's quite even, self-employee or employees. Some people are on a work contract for their own business, but, it's about 50-50 so far.
Now, the criteria is that you have to have professional qualifications or something, don't you? And you actually have to do a certain percentage of your work in Spain.
Yeah, well, basically you need to have worked either professionally, for yourself or as an employee at least 3 months. You need to have at least certificates, like a undergraduate degree in the sector, or they will allow people with at least 3 years experience in that sector. The company that you work for, or the companies that you collaborate with, will need to have been around for at least a year. And basically, if you comply with all these requirements, then we can see, we can apply for a nomad permit. It's not really apt for someone who has multiple clients, someone working for themselves, doing, a financial advisor who doesn't have a main company client, because they want, a letter from that client or from your employer to say you are permitted to work remotely, specifically from Spain. So it's not really apt for someone with thousands of clients who would need thousands of letters. So it's not really apt for that kind of application.
You have to earn a certain amount of money.
Absolutely. You need to, if it's just yourself who's going to relocate on the Nomad permit, you need to have at least 2,520 in monthly salary, or that, your monthly invoices, your professional invoices presented to for self-employment. They want to see 2,520 euros or more per month. If we have a spouse or children, certainly the first dependent, you'd need to have 945 euros on top of that per month, and any additional dependents like children, and a further 315 euros per month.
Yes, because you say you can bring your family on this visa, can't you? You just
Absolutely.
have to have the financial resources.
Yeah, your spouse could actually work in Spain as a dependent on a digital nomad. So that opens a way to be able to, get a Spanish work contract, or the spouse could get self-employment, or also they allow dependent children. So if you have adult children that are financially or dependent other ways, they'll be able to work in Spain too.
Great. And we're going to talk about the documents you need, but you do need to have private healthcare cover?
This depends. There's 3 scenarios. One is if you're going to be continuing UK national insurance contributions, then there's a possibility. I've not had a client yet who has obtained it yet, but you can passport the healthcare with an S1. Okay, this is for someone who, let's say you're from the UK, has an A1 certificate for relocating abroad. That's for national insurance contributions. Then they can get an S1. If they don't have entitlement to that, then a private health insurance would be required. Or if the employee or the self-employee were to commit to the Spanish social security system, then they will be paying contributions to Spain. Then they wouldn't need private health insurance.
Okay. What about the required documents that you need simply for this application?
Well, obviously, we're going to need, I'm talking mostly about the permit if we applied in Spain. They like to see that you hadn't overstayed the 90-day Schengen limit when you submit your application. You need to provide a full copy of your passport, an NIE certificate. In some cases, we've been able to do the permit without an NIE, but I understand the consulates won't allow you to apply without an NIE. You have to have an NIE. There's an application form to complete. We need to show proof of continued activity of the company or your employer for at least a year. That's a certificate from the company's house or equivalent, whichever country you're of origin. We need your degree certificates or 3 years experience, a CV. They'd like you to present a CV, which my clients will send me in English, and I will do a normal translation. All the other documents will require a sworn translation, but certainly the CV, I'm willing to translate that myself. They'd like the A1, or if you're a self-employee and you're willing to go into the Spanish system, they'll allow you to apply for autónomo. This is self-employment in Spain, and by doing a responsible declaration, it's basically like a promise to submit yourself to the Spanish system once you're approved. So, you know, self-employees, people applying under that kind of situation, don't require to wait, you know, 3 or 4 months for an A1 certificate. This is something, you know, with the national insurance contributions, that's to keep paying UK national insurance. But self-employees could do the process a lot quicker. They need to have the healthcare that I mentioned, either S1 private health insurance or commit to the Spanish system. They need a criminal record check for the last 2 years, and also to do a declaration to say that they've not a criminal record in any other country for the last 5 years. For a spouse, we need an updated marriage certificate. People laugh sometimes when they say, I got married 20 years ago, I'm still married. But we need to prove that you're still married with an updated certificate. So for children, would need the birth certificate just to prove that bond you share with the children. And also, as I was talking about, we need to show your last 3 invoices or salary slips and last 3 months of the payment of those invoices or salaries.
Wow, that's quite a lot to take on board, isn't it? So, I mean, if people can try and do this on their own, or they can get help from someone like you. I mean, because that's if you don't speak Spanish as well. I mean, how do people manage? So, I mean, it's really helpful to have your know-how in this process, isn't it?
Yeah, there's a lot of people, you know, eager to apply for this kind of permit. We have to see their suitability, if they meet the requirements. There's other issues to worry about too, such as if you're going to be relocating to Spain, you have to be think about your tax situation. So it's not, you know, good idea to up sticks and move everything without knowing, oof, I needed to do all these things before. So if you're selling your home to relocate, because you would be relocating on this kind of permit, you'd be obliged to spend more than 6 months per the annual periods of your permit to live in Spain. So you are going to be becoming, you know, probably tax resident, but there's a new regime coming out called the Beckham's Law. Well, it's already out, but there's a new derivative for the Nomad. So it's important to look at all these things too, to get some expert advice. You know, it's something you need to really look at before upping sticks and you know, racing to Spain, because you could, you know, to avoid any pitfalls. Okay.
And how long would this process take with your help?
Well, I advise clients right at the beginning regarding the national insurance contribution, you know, the A1 certificate. That can take, you know, three or more months to obtain. So the timeline really depends on the situation of the client. A police check can take about a month to obtain. it requires an apostille, and we need to translate most of the documents. So if you're going to be working for yourself and you're going to commit to the Spanish system, things can be done a lot quicker. But it's important to get the police check, the ACRO certificate obtained, most likely before coming. But these kind of a lot of documents can expire, so timing is a really essential thing. And basically, once you get to Spain, let's say you skip the visa part, when you get to Spain, then we'll have to be care of the 90-day limit and get everything prepared. We need a stamp, an entry stamp into your passport proving your legal entry to Spain, and then we can make an application. It takes typically about 2 weeks to get an answer, or if they require further paperwork, they will put a requirement. You've got 10 days to answer that, and then we can get the approval.
Great. So would you advise that people start getting those bits of paperwork together before they even go to Spain? Because otherwise they might overstay their 90 days once you're in that process.
Exactly. Once you've arrived to Spain, we've got that clock ticking. It's important that we get all the right paperwork, all within the right timing, and all presented in an adequate way. If you want to try and apply, electronically yourself, there's a lot of things that you're probably not aware, and you need someone with experience like myself to be able to guide you.
Brilliant. Well, there's quite a lot of information there. We're going to touch on some more with some questions, but let's talk to Elliott about how to get an idea of one person's experience. Elliott, why did you decide you wanted to, were you working in the UK and you thought, why don't I go and live in Spain and do what I'm doing?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I was one of the few people that actually worked remotely before COVID. I was working for a company in the Midlands, but I then moved to Cardiff with my now wife. So I was used to working remotely. I would travel into the office for 1 or 2 days a week. During COVID, my wife and I sort of had a sabbatical from work. We both left our jobs and we came out to Spain, and we just thought, why would we not want to live here? This is always where we are now in Javier. It's always been a great holiday destination for us. My wife has come here since she was a child, and we just thought, with our jobs and the way what COVID has opened people's eyes to working remotely, we thought, why would we not want to work here and enjoy the Spanish life?
Brilliant. So you're in IT, and do you work for a company or do you work for yourself?
Yeah, so I work for a company called ProBrand Limited. So an IT reseller or managed service provider. So my job is to look after clients and customers. So as long as I have an internet connection, and nowadays you can have Zoom calls, Teams calls, soft phones and everything like that. So as long as I've got an internet connection, I can look after clients and work anywhere, still speak to my colleagues as I would if I was sat next to them in the office. So they were great. They supported me. I was brought in to work for them as a remote worker because I was still living in Cardiff and their office is in Birmingham. And then when I suggested to them I would like the opportunity to work abroad, they were happy to support me with it.
And what does your wife do?
So my wife is a transport planner for P&O Ferry Masters, but obviously because she's coming out here on my visa as a dependent, as Marcus already mentioned, she will be leaving her job at some shortly, and so because she can get a job here, whether she wants to just get some part-time work or to set up her own business, she's got that facility. So she again works remotely. But as she's coming out as a dependency on my visa, then she'll seek new work when we're all settled here.
Brilliant. So you did you hear about this? Obviously, you weren't really going to be looking at the other visa options with your setup. How did you hear about this visa, and what did you think first of all that you would try on your own, or how did you go about getting help?
In terms of how I first heard about it, it was my wife that found it and heard about it, because I believe Italy and Portugal already have these visas in place. I think it's those two countries. There may be more, or maybe neither of them, but this is something that we were looking at a long time ago, and you know, it's something that we'd always had planned for a long time. So it took a lot longer than we would have hoped, and you know, it's been going on for some time before it finally got released. So when it did get released in December last year, it was a real relief that it was finally light at the end of the tunnel. So it's something that we've been thinking about, you know, close to 2 years, maybe 18 months or so, that we've been aiming to get out here with this visa.
And then you got in touch with Sun Lawyers.
Yeah, yeah. So my wife and I came out here in February. We were hoping that we would be able to come out with some of the documents that we knew we needed, and you know, try and liaise with some solicitors. It became quite clear that even though we came out in February hoping that we would be able to start our application, that it still wasn't confirmed from in terms of what legislation, what documentation was needed. And a friend of mine who I met out here actually sent me a video to a webinar that Mark did with yourself. So and then we thought, well, they clearly know what they're talking about. So I got in touch with Mark off the back of that webinar. And yeah, I think that was around March time, and yeah, Mark and I kept in touch while I was back in the UK until he confirmed what documentation we needed.
Brilliant. And when did you get your visa permit through?
I got it back 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago today. So we got it back. So I think Mark may have mentioned in terms of there's a sort of a 20-day no response from them in terms of the application process, and we got it on the 19th day. So it was you know, right on time, and there was no issues, no problems. They were all happy with everything. You know, there was no pushbacks for a change in documentation, which was great, because obviously any sort of delay on that would sort of jeopardize potentially with the Schengen rule and us staying within 90 days. But yeah, the process was great, and yeah, we got the visa back 2 weeks ago.
Great. So you're enjoying life in Spain now. You're renting a place and having a nice lifestyle, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually went and viewed a long-term rental because obviously there's a lot of winter rentals available on the coast of Spain, but there aren't that many options for annual rentals. But we went and viewed a property yesterday, and we got confirmed on that. So yeah, everything's moving in the right direction, and hopefully we'll have our own place long-term for the next 3 years, as obviously that's the length of the visa. Whether we do another 2 years after that, we'll wait and see. But yeah, it's all coming into place. It's really great.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you for that. That's best of luck. Thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
So Matthew, we do a lot of Place in the Sun exhibitions, don't we?
Yes.
But currency exchange is a key part of people moving to Spain, making purchases of property, doing any kind of transactions. Tell us about why it's so important to use a service like yours.
Sure. So we kind of help clients in two key areas in terms of the exchange rate. And first and foremost is the rate itself. Typically, we can help you save as much as 2 or 3% over using your bank. The second area, and sort of secondary to that, is the ways in which you can order currency through us, and the guidance that we can provide in terms of timing, you know, how best to kind of try and manage the movement of money from the UK to Spain, or indeed anywhere else that you might be looking to buy. And that sort of second part, the service that we provide, the different ways in which you can kind of move your money, can magnify the saving on the rate significantly. You know, comfortably, you could be looking in you know, upwards of 5% in terms of what we'd have you save over the bank. But one of the sort of other key areas I suggest is the kind of hand-holding aspect that we can provide. It can be very, very stressful moving a lot of money, particularly if you've not done it before, or you know, used the currency service. You know, using your bank, it can be quite a daunting process, because you know, who do you speak to? You know, where do you go? Do you speak to someone on the phone or go into branch? We've got a team of specialists here with, you know, wealth of experience, and we can kind of, you know, understand that each person will have a different circumstances and different situation, and we can kind of help guide you. So you know, we're given the term consultants because that's what we do. We try and understand sort of the individual's position and how best to assist them when moving their money.
Because the pound euro's been very up and down, hasn't it? So I mean, you know exactly when to transfer that client's money to get the best rate and make the most for them.
Yeah, we would exactly. I wish I did know exactly. I'd be particularly wealthy, but we can certainly help you to avoid getting things wrong. So there's ways in which we can help clients sort of mitigate risk of poorly timing the transaction. If you were to use your bank to move money, for example, aside from who you speak to, banks don't really give you the facility or the option to do things like secure currency advance, set target rates. Your bank manager would never call you and say, hi, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. I know what you're looking to do. I'm aware that you've got funds available. And, you need to move them within this time frame. Understanding that the exchange rate is in your favour today, have you considered option ABC, things like cost averaging or tranche trading, so rather than if you've got a particularly large amount of money, clients may elect to kind of split that down, so to kind of take a cost averaging approach. By doing that, you kind of guarantee that you're not going to time it wrong, because if you do, if you say you've got 3 chunks, you do the first chunk, if the rate goes up afterwards, you've still got more to convert. If it goes down, you've always taken some of that risk with the first part. So I've done this for 12 years. I've trained in sort of market behaviour and technical analysis. I'm able to provide guidance, but I can't provide advice, and that's due to a regulation. But certainly, the service that I and indeed the other guys here can provide can make a huge difference. Not just in terms of the price, but I think the journey for the clients as well, because moving the money is such a huge part of relocation, buying property. A lot of the clients who are looking at the kind of relocation or the nomadic passport they may be moving funds back and forward at times, whether that be salary, maybe income from the UK. So it's not, typically it wouldn't just be one transaction. So we're able to kind of manage that process on behalf of the clients, and aside from saving the money, make it a lot easier and stress-free.
Brilliant. People can come and meet you at Place in the Sun exhibition and talk more, as they can Sun Lawyers as well. So it's a no-brainer, really, using a currency exchange service. You save money. There's no reason not to, is there? So
we're FCA regulated. We've got the highest levels of safety and security you can have in our industry. So your money's safe and secure at all times. Often we are quicker than a bank in terms of being able to send funds. We do things like we utilise an account in Germany, so if you're sending funds to Spain or indeed anywhere in Europe, when it arrives, it's coming from a German euro account. The reason for that is, since Brexit, there are many instance charges that can be levied if you send directly from the UK now outside the EU. So, Spain, for example, different banks have different thresholds in which even if you send from a bank account within the EU, if you send over that particular threshold per bank, they can charge you. So it can be a minefield. I think as Mark mentioned, you just got to kind of get the people with the right expertise and knowledge around you to help guide you through the process.
thank you, Matthew. Brilliant. Right, we have a few questions. Mark, I've got a question here from Pat Evans about how easy or difficult is it to change from a non-lucrative visa to a digital nomad visa? Would that be possible?
Well, being in Spain on a non-lucrative, and you can't work, so you can't be self-employed, you can't go on a work contract. So really, to make this kind of switch, it's somebody would need to get a job lined up, go back to a non-EU, go back to the country of origin, get working for 3 months, self-employed or as an employee, and get the employer to agree to, or your client to agree that you could work remotely from Spain 3 months later. And in the meantime, if you're doing the A1, get that applied for immediately. So it is a go back, set it all up, and then come back again. So it's not a matter of doing it in Spain.
I think this is why it's so key that from the word go, that they get the correct advice from you about which visa from the start, isn't it? Because exactly. This transferring is tricky. I've got a question from Elizabeth Yates about, if you're self-employed but your business is based online, can you apply for digital nomad visa, or do you have to be employed? Well, we know the answer, that you don't have to be employed. Yeah.
Either or, you can apply for this kind of permit. Just self-employed, 3-month working, and employee, 3-month working on a contract. Typically, they want a contract with that business that you're working. If you're self-employed, your invoices for 3 months and payment in the bank of the 3 months, or salary 3 months, copy of your contract, and a letter from the employer or your collaborating business.
We've touched on the property aspects of these visas, and obviously Elliot mentioned that he's having a long-term rental. Elizabeth asks, are you allowed to buy a property with a nomad visa? And I mean, I think the answer is yes, isn't it? You can rent or buy a property.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why you couldn't purchase a home. You know, we have non-residents, you know, buying property through our relocation, through our conveyancing department. We have residents, non-resident, EU, non-EU. There's no real reason why you couldn't buy or rent. Obviously, if you're going to do an annual rental contract and you don't have the visa yet, then, you know, it's sometimes timing's an important thing to be aware of.
But owning a property in Spain, it wouldn't give you any kind of benefit if you applied for this visa, would it?
No, there's no major advantage. Initially, at the start, you know, at the beginning, we were thinking, okay, it's like the other visas or the other permits. You need to show money in the bank or you know, financial means. But here, they want to see your contract with your collaborating business or your salaries, and that you comply with the minimum requirement. So, you know, on a non-lucrative visa, they will look at property as part of financial means. I had a client who was very close to the income part, but we did appeal using the property document from the land registry, and we got the approval. We pushed just over the line. So I do know personally is property is okay for a non-lucrative visa, for example, but not for this kind of nomad permit.
Okay, and what about the employer? What is the onus on them to do for the applicant applying for the digital nomad permit?
Well, basically, if the company is not willing to get registered in the Spanish Social Security, there's a lot of paperwork involved, time and costs, then the client will get the A1 certificate or the equivalent from another country, relocate, and you're still going to be paying your employee. The company's still going to be British or other national company. And basically, it's the onus of the individual to pay his taxes to the appropriate authorities and the appropriate country.
Yeah, talking about tax, Gordon Tyndall asks, you know, you've touched on this briefly, Mark, but how is tax calculated? And if I already pay UK tax, how do you split it?
Well, we'll have to look at the kind of incomes that you're earning, and there's a special regime, a derivative of the Beckham's law, where people from 50,000 euros to 600,000 euro annual income have a fixed 24% tax rate. They're actually out of the dual taxation treaty, so they're not covered by that. They are taxed on their income, salaries, at this fixed rate, and other incomes such as capital gains tax, rental income, it's all handled a different way. But imagine you didn't come under the 50 and up to 600,000 annual income, then you'll be under the normal tax regime. So, you know, I headed our tax department. I'm aware if you're taxed at source, then, you know, there is a treaty in place where you don't pay the same tax twice. Okay, so if you have the obligation to pay it in one place, it can be deducted from the other place. So, you know, it's important to know which regime or which setup you're going to be doing later. And so timing is an important thing. have all that organized and figured out before you commit in a process.
Okay. A question from Stephen Etheridge. He says, if I apply for the digital nomad visa and live in Spain and then decide to retire, because there are so many great things to do there, can I apply for the non-lucrative visa while being resident in Spain?
Well, I had a look on the government website, and yes, we can do an application, convert from one to the other. Yeah, we don't have to do a visa. The visa really is just to get an access to get a permit in Spain. So, you know, if you have a digital nomad permit, then we can do an application in Spain. You don't have to go back to the UK, like we said, for the reverse, from non-lucrative to digital nomad. You can do it in Spain.
And another question from him, and this I suppose this would depend, for instance, if Elliott's wife wanted to get a new job. He says, if I qualify for the digital nomad visa, can my wife get a regular job in Spain?
Absolutely. Under this, dependent of a nomad, they're able to work in self-employed or on a Spanish contract. There's no limit. The nomad, however, let's say you're self-employed, you can generate 20% of your activity with Spanish companies.
And where would she pay tax?
Obviously, in Spain.
Right. Okay.
On a Spanish contract or self-employment in Spain, it's a bit more in depth, but there would she would be tax resident of Spain.
And then if someone is a self-employed IT contractor, how does the qualifying rule about working for a company for 3 months work?
What do you mean? If you're working for 3 months for online IT, just like Elliott?
If he's self-employed rather than being like Elliott.
Well, if you're self-employed, you have the option to obtain an A1 certificate and continue national insurance, which is separate to taxation. But there is also the option to do a declaration to say that you would commit to the Spanish system once you have approved, and then they can set up self-employment in Spain. There'll be quarterly tax returns. Remember that the tax year is January to December, so January, February, March would be the first quarter. You'll declare that in April for all your profit and costs, and you'll do your annual tax return the following year. But we'll have to see if you commit to the derivative of the Beckham's law or not, to see how taxes would be declared and what you'd be declaring.
I think from interviewing a few people who've gone the route where they've actually have their own company and moved to Spain, that the Spanish way of recognizing how many directors in a company is slightly different to the UK, so it can be quite complicated, can't it, about working out how you set up that?
Yeah, well, for the nomad, they're looking at your clients. Yeah, we'll need a company house certificate, you know, with the date of incorporation of your company. Also, your client, they want a certificate to say that they've been around for at least a year. So we need a company house certificate from there too. This is specifically for, you know, anywhere, but company's house is UK, obviously, based. We do need your client and your company certificates. And typically, if you have a co-director signing a letter to say he authorizes you to work remotely.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, everyone's very different when they make this application, which is why you're building up a great bulk of sort of knowledge of do's and don'ts. I mean, if you were to pick out some real sort of things not to do when to be careful of with this application that you've noticed, what would you suggest?
Not rush to Spain. with blinded without even considering the consequences, and not being rushing to a maybe unattainable deadline. So timing is the important thing. If you're selling your house in the UK, it's important that you do it before you become tax resident of Spain. So you need to think about some things a year in advance if possible. So timing is important, and taxation. That's the other major consideration.
Brilliant. Elliot, I mean, any things that you would, what was the most sort of hard aspect of the process for you? I know you've got net expert help, but is there anything that you would really say to people that they should really get their head around?
I would say similar to what Mark has said around the timings. I mean, Mark obviously mentioned, not rushing out to Spain like I did, hoping that, we'd be able to get here. But, we weren't, we didn't sell houses and things like that. We still had the option to return to the UK. So, we obtained our ACRO form beforehand, but by the time we got to actually apply for this a couple of months ago, it expired. So we then had to get another one. So I think the timing is key, and not rushing. And I think, just not setting, like Mark said, not setting unobtainable deadlines and things like that, because you could wait 3 months for an A1 form, you could wait a month for an ACRO form. So if you're not getting the timings quite right, and then getting sworn translations and things. So I think one of the difficult things is, in regards to a lot of the applications, you have to put addresses and things like that on there, whereas obviously a lot of people in certain scenarios won't have an address in Spain. And I'm fortunate that I have my wife have a house here, so we can use that as a base. So there's lots of things to consider when going ahead with it.
Brilliant, thank you for that. Well, we've got there's so many questions, but we won't have time to answer all of them. But Mark, is there anything else that you want to flag up to people that is really key for people to understand?
Basically, it's quite important to be aware of this 90-day rule, and a lot of people are aware now. But it's the same government department as investors, and if it takes too long, then we can you may have overstayed and you'll get rejected for that. But a lot of the times I'm on a clock. I have a deadline. My life now is getting to deadlines, and if we're missing something, I'll assess the situation with the client. And even if we're missing something, I would maybe submit anyway the application, just to freeze that clock. The 90-day will freeze. There won't be forced to leave the country. Paperwork won't expire. But as we were saying, there's a period for them to answer or to require more paperwork. If we can get the documentation in the meantime, we can submit it. Even if we were rejected, we then have a month to appeal it. And with the experience we have in appealing, we can, if we need to lengthen things out, okay, if we have to appeal, it takes 3 months to get an answer. So all that time the client can stay in Spain, but the best thing is to have everything in a timely fashion, and we can apply without panic.
So have you had some objections?
For delays of an A1 certificate, it's been some clients have had issues. I'm appealing, but if we can get the client advised in advance, if you're planning to keep UK national insurance, then they have to get moving ASAP, basically, and start that ball rolling.
And I think we've talked about this before, but the importance of proving when you entered Spain. If you fly in, you can get a stamp in your passport. But if you drive over, like an increasing number of people I'm hearing are doing, you need to get the ferry. You need to get some kind of proof, don't you?
Yeah, you need to prove your legal entry into Spain. You'll get an entry into the Schengen area, And because there's, let's say you go via the channel, you get a French stamp. How did you get to Spain, or when, or, you know, basically clients will need to prove that. And basically, mostly if we can get purchases on a card or an invoice of a hotel, as soon as you get to Spain, you could stay in Tarragona or something, get a Spanish invoice from the hotel. Otherwise, we need to translate anything that's not in Spanish. So it's a lot cheaper if we can get an entry stamp to Spain. If not, we need to possibly translate even more documentation.
Okay, thank you. So if people have got some more questions about this, how do they get in contact with you? What's the first stage of if they're interested in getting this visa? How explain how it will work?
Us, yeah, via our website. It's www.sun-lawyers.com. You can make ask for our admin you can fill out a form basically, or you can even email myself directly. My email's mark@sun-lawyers.com, and we can start a free first consultation, because our first consultation is free, and we can assess your situation, if you're likely to be able to make an application, or if we need to look at an alternative.
Brilliant. And also do you do seminars on this at Place in the Sun, and you have other resources, don't you? So
absolutely, we'll do exhibitions, seminars. We'll have a website, a very complete website with a lot of information. But it's best, I think, to hear from the horse's mouth, someone who has experience, to get some more concrete answers, rather than saying, I heard this, that we can do this, basically. It's good to get someone who knows and has experience.
I think that's a really key thing to flag up, because there's so much misinformation on social media now about visas, and a lot of negative things, that it's not possible, blah, 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 but it is possible. And Elliott's proved that. And I've interviewed numerous case studies that through your successful applicants for a Place in the Sun. So, you know, you've dealt with dozens of successful applicants, haven't you?
Absolutely. And with the proper guidance, you can get a successful application approved. Brilliant.
Well, thank you for all that. We're going to wrap up now, but people can get in touch with you in the ways you've suggested. Look on the website. Sorry we haven't answered everyone's questions, but there are a lot of very individual circumstances, and you'll be able to help them with that. Thank you to Elliott. Good luck with your new life in Spain. I'm sure many people are very envious you've come out with a successful application on that. And Matthew, thanks for that. Place in the Sun currency, people can go to the website, get in touch with you, come to our exhibition.
Yes, this month, absolutely. And if I'll just mention, if they want to register with us, which is free to do, there's no obligation to use, we don't share details with anyone. You'll be emailed a link for some free tickets. So if anyone's thinking about attending the show, if you'd like to register off the back of this, you can find us on the website, placeinthesuncurrency.com. If you mention in the notes this webinar or my name, we can get you some free tickets organised as well. So hopefully some of you might attend the show later this month.
Thank you very much. Okay, well, look, thank you all of you. We hope that's been useful, and good luck with getting your visa. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.